Hey there guys, welcome back for another Mortal Realms Monday painting video. This week I'm painting the Lord Relictor, or Relictor, however you pronounce it, from issue 41 of the Mortal Realms magazine. And I'm painting him in subsections, so you'll notice he's missing the staff and the ribbons or whatever they are on his back. Those will be painted later on in the video. And what I'm doing now is applying a 50-50 mix of Abaddon Black and Incubi Darkness. This has got the Incubi Darkness quite dark, it's almost close to black but with a slight bluish tint to it. And that's because although he's part of my Celestial Vindicators army, I wanted him to stand out a little bit different, similar to how chaplains stand out in the 40k universe. I wanted him to have the similar kind of thing where he's in a different kind of armor but he's still part of that army. So the Incubi Darkness is to give the armor that hint of it. It's black but it's got that hint of the Celestial Vindicators blue turquoise look to it. So first of all, I'm applying this over any of the sort of larger flat exposed areas of the model, leaving some of the under areas and you know, recesses and such Abaddon black, so that they are black and dark. And what I'm going to do is build up a highlight within this to represent that light reflecting but giving it that sort of coloured highlight look. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this, like I said, to all the sort of the flat surface areas, anywhere that's going to be exposed to light. This is watered down so that I can layer it up a little bit and get a nice blend from that Abaddon black up into this 50-50 mix. But it's so close that it's, you know, it's just about noticeable when looking at close. But I'll get on with that and we'll be back in a bit. Okay, so now that I've got the 50-50 mix on, I'm now going to go around the whole piece and edge highlight with a fairly thick edge. So this isn't a fine edge highlight, this is a bit of a thicker one, with pure Incubi Darkness, slightly thinned down. And like I say, this is going to go over any of the sharp edges, in particular along those flat surfaces that I've done with the 50-50 mix. In terms of the gauntlets and the leg guards, I did consider doing them gold, but I thought that they'd be a bit too vibrant, a bit too much standout for the kind of look that I wanted to go with this guy. So I kept them black and just had the gold trim on the front of them that surrounds the bone inlay. But you can see here how I'm sort of building the Incubi Darkness up a little bit, just to get it slightly brighter, and you know, with a little bit of a thick edge highlight. And then we're going to build on this by adding an extra colour to brighten it up just a little bit more. So I'll get on with these edge highlights and we'll come back for that next highlight step. Okay, so next up I'm now adding a small amount of Sotek Green into the Incubi Darkness. This is probably about a 50-50 mix, maybe a little bit more Incubi Darkness, and this is to give me another level of highlight. Again, this is going for to build it up to that slightly more Celestial Vindicator look whilst maintaining that black armour look to it. So again, this is going to go round now, rather than all the edges like I did with the Incubi Darkness. This is just going to go around the edges that are a little bit more exposed to the light. So mainly along the front of the model, tops of his feet, tops of his hands, little spikes and things like that. So again, I'll get on with this. We'll be back in a bit. And welcome back. So moving on to the shoulder guards now. Obviously The Celestial Vindicators, they have the white pauldrons with obviously the turquoise armour, but in this case he's got the black armour. So for the white pauldrons, I'm actually using Ulth 1 Grey. This is slightly thinned down, so it's going to take me a good 3 or 4 layers to get this nice and smooth. You know, so there's no black showing through, but it will leave a nice smooth finish at the end. Obviously, with it being Ulth 1 Grey, it is a very off-white. Obviously, it has that grey tone to it, but this will allow me to build up a little bit better with some white for a bit of highlighting on top of that. When it comes to blacks and whites, because obviously white is the brightest you can go in itself and black is the darkest you can go in itself, you never want to have those obviously as your midtones, because then you can't go brighter or darker than them. So for blacks, I always try and go for a slightly more blue-grey look for the lighter areas, and for whites I always go for an Ulth 1 Grey, or maybe a very thin edge highlight of Dawnstone Grey or something like that. But for the most part it's Ulth 1 Grey and then highlight with a nice white. So you can see here that I'm now going over the bone parts of his armour, so his knee guards and his gauntlets, or his shin guards and his gauntlets. This is so that I can apply some bone colour over them a little bit later on. I think that the black might have made the bone a little bit too dark, so I wanted a bit more of a lighter colour under that. Okay, so next up I'm applying some Retributor armour to all of the gold parts of the armour. So this is the trim that goes around the bones on both his legs and his arms, as well as the trim around his pauldron and the emblem that he has on his chest. Also he has these light rays, these golden light rays coming off his pauldrons and from just behind his head, so those will be done in gold as well. The only other part that would be gold is the lightning bolt that comes out or forms part of his hammer. I could have done that the same metallic silver that I use the hammer, or do for the hammer, but I wanted it to stand out again a little bit in contrast. The only other areas that will be gold, but I do add them later on, is his belt buckle, and there's a small little gold lightning emblem on his the little strips on the front of his tabard, or whatever that cloth bit at the front is, and then obviously studs and rivets and things like that are added later on. But what I'll do, I'll get on. We'll be back once this gold has been applied. Okay, so for this little loincloth tabard area type thing, it's typically red on these guys for the Celestial Vindicators, and so for the first layer I'm applying Mephiston red. Now this is thinned down a little bit. It does look a little bit brighter on my camera. At the moment I'm using a cheapish webcam, and so the colour pickup isn't really 100% to what it should be, which is obviously is why I'm naming the colours that I'm using, so that you guys know what they should actually be. You'll also note that the plate mail on the cloth area just underneath this where I'm painting now, I also went in and did that gold. I chose to do that rather than silver, just so that it matched the rest of the gold throughout the armour. So I'm going to go ahead, get a couple of layers of Mephiston red on this, get it nice and opaque. Also the trim around the plate mail armour on the cloth dangling down from this area. The trim around the edge of that, as well as the back of that, will also be done with the Mephiston red. Okay, and with the Mephiston red done, I'm using now some Evil Sun Scarlet as a fairly thick highlight, sort of a mid-tone, just to really bring out the details, the raised parts and the edges of all of these red areas. Obviously this would also go down along the trim, but only picking off areas where the light is going to hit sort of a large area. Okay, so now all that's left to paint up on this, or for this area, is the hammer here and the some of the tapestry stuff that he has flowing from him. So for the hammer and any other metallic silver areas, as far as I can remember on this guy, it is only the hammer. I'm using Iron Breaker, and obviously being careful not to get this on the gold there. You'll notice that I've done the pommel, the bottom of the hammer, in gold, but the area just under the head of the hammer here I didn't do gold. That was intentional. I thought that it would look a little bit odd having that gold and then into the Iron Breaker and then that gold bit on top. So that area just under the hammer that attaches it to the hilt will be, or the handle, will be Iron Breaker as well. But I'll get on with this and then we'll come back for the next step. Okay, so for the tapestry banner type pieces he has here, you can see I'm just throwing in some Oath 1 grey. Again, this is to be able to get that parchment bone type colour on there, without having the black be too sort of overpowering underneath. I prefer to use bone colours on top of a white or grey rather than a black. Personally, I feel that it gives a better finish. But I'll get on with this and then we can see about adding the actual colour. And so for the tapestry itself, obviously I'm showing here doing the piece that attaches to his back, that essentially forms a cloak. I went ahead and primed this in grey, so there was no need to go on with the Oath 1 grey. I'm now applying some Morghast bone, I think that's how you pronounce it, Morghast bone, over all of this. This has been thinned down a little bit, so it will take 2 or 3 coats to get this on nice and even. But yeah, the recipe that I pretty much use is Morghast bone, shade with Seraphim Sapia, and then go over with the Wraith bone. But we'll see that in a little bit. Now obviously whilst I'm doing this, I will also be doing the same for the piece that is attached to the actual figure himself. It was just the small piece that is attached to the staff and the banner, I suppose you could call it, that I don't do at this time. I will do that separately when I come to doing the banner. As well as the banner, I also go over all of the bone areas with the same Morghast bone. So obviously on the banner piece, that will be all the skulls and skeletons and things like that, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. For now I'm just focusing on the main character and his tapestry cloak. So again, I'll get on with this, we'll be back in a bit. Okay, so with the model done for the most part at this stage, it's now time to go through and add all my washes and shades. I like to do this all in one go, even if I'm using various washes, if I can, as long as they're not going to touch or interfere with each other. So for the red areas, I'm using Reichland Flesh shade. This has a nice reddish tone to it, which obviously when it sets in there, because it's got that brown tint, gives a nice brown red shadow to red areas. I will then switch that out for the gloss version, so it's Relictor Flesh Shade Gloss, and use this for all of the gold. Obviously the gloss will retain that shininess that the gold has, and I will apply this less like a wash, and I will be a little bit more sort of particular on where I apply it. I want this to settle in areas as a shadow, more like if I was painting highlights on, say, the black area. If I was to do it in reverse and use the black and blend down from the lighter areas, I'm doing the same with this, but using the flesh shade. The alternative to this would be if I was to use something like Balthazar Gold, then obviously I would work that way round. But I like the pooling effect that the shade can give, in particular on areas such as where I'm doing now, where I can let it pool just a little bit. Areas such as the spikes, obviously I want to just sort of almost glaze it and tint that area rather than let it sit and pool up. Now for the shoulder guards, I'm using some non-oil here, and I'm just very carefully running this around that edge trim. It does go a little bit thick, but I can just go back over that and blend it back in a little bit with some more Ulth 1 grey, and just tidy that up. But obviously I want to get some of this black settling and lining right down into that recess, where the gold meets the white. I will also use this for the metal on the hammerhead, so the silver area, obviously to sort of dirty that up, stain it up, and give some shade into the recesses on the hammer. And you can see here that I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but the skull mask, I decided to go with a nice white skull rather than making it look bone. I wanted it to give that sort of white horror look to it. It blends in with it, sort of fits in with the pauldrons better than if I had done it bone. So yeah, obviously putting some non-oil in there to get those dark recesses with that as well. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, I'm taking some Seraphim Sapphire and applying this all over the banner pieces. I like to let this sit right into the letters that are sculpted into these guys. That way it gives it a nice sort of deep reddish tint to the lettering, and then a slight reddish tint on the flatter areas, which we can then work with once this is dried. So like I say, try and getting it to pool into the letters, so occasionally if it doesn't quite fit in there, I will actually blob it in there. I don't want it overflowing the letters, you know, it does have to fit in them, and just sit in them nicely. Obviously I'll do that on the guy as well as on the cloak that will be attached to his back. And finally, for the bone areas, I will use some Agrax Earthshade. This gives it a slightly dirtier, more brown look to the bone, which will, even though they're both painted with Morghast bone, it will look different to the banner pieces that are on his cloak. So they're the same underpaint, but two different washes will give two different results. I'll let this dry for about 15-20 minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, so now that all those shades have dried, I'm now taking some white scar and using this as some highlight area for the shoulder pads. Now obviously I want the majority of these shoulder pads to be white, but they do need a little bit of that sort of, you know, grey tone just underneath or just on the outside edges before they hit that black edge. I'll also do this obviously for the skull mask, So obviously the top of his head, cheekbones, teeth, ridge of the nose, things like that, you know, those edge highlights will be picked out with this white scar. Okay, so moving on to the gold areas, I'm now taking some Stormhost Silver and just using this for highlighting the edges that are going to be more towards my light source, which is coming from the hammer's direction. And then obviously edge highlighting any of the gold areas. For the gold cloak piece that he has, I will be leaving that with the shade in there, as it's quite sort of in folds, the scales are quite small, and as I'm not going into super detail on this guy, he's just tabletop quality, so you know, nothing overly fancy done on him, just some basic layers, shades, and then some highlights. But I'll get on with this. Obviously I'll use this as well to highlight the hammer, also the silver iron parts of the hammer, and we'll be back in just a bit. Right, and to finish off the red areas, I'm now taking some Wild Rider Red and just using this for some very fine edge highlighting, and just picking off the sort of the top peaks of some of those small folds and such. And you'll notice in the middle of that, or at the bottom of that middle strip of red, I haven't painted the lightning emblem there gold yet. It's not until I finish the model that I realise I forgot it and then touch it up, but not to worry, that will get done. But yeah, that's the red done, so we'll come back in just a bit. Okay, so for the banners, first off I'm taking some Morghast bone and just going over those flat areas again, some of the surface areas where the light is going to hit. So obviously that's pretty much anything parallel to the ground, and then vertical outside edges. I'm going around the lettering, apart from some of these exposed flat areas where even though they're recessed, the light will still get in there and hide or not produce shadows. So I can go in there a little bit with this and just bring it back up to that Morghast bone type colour. Obviously I'll go ahead and do this the same on the cloak as well, but we'll get on with that and then we'll come back in for the final step of highlight on the Tapestry Banner type stuff here. And for the final highlights on the ribbons here, I'm using some Morghast bone, and this obviously is going to be the brightest point of this, so it's going to be on outside edges, anything that is parallel to the ground as before, but just on edges. I use this to line around the edge of the lettering. On vertical pieces such as where I'm doing now, I'll line anything that is on the bottom edge, left hand edge, or a sloping edge. Any top edges will obviously be left as they'll be casting shadow. So yeah, I'll also use this for some highlight on the bones on the arms and that, but as you can see, the wash gives them a nice sort of stain and makes them look like bone anyway, so really this is just used for a slight highlight to those bone areas. Okay, so unfortunately guys, I lost the footage of painting the base tones of the banner up, but they have all been done the same as the armour itself. So obviously the black has had that 50-50 mix of Incubi and Abaddon black, then built up with the Sotek green to get some highlight. The ribbon and the skeleton and candles have all been done with Morghast bone. and the gold has been done with the Retributor armour and then Iron Breaker on the sword. The only thing that I've added here or done, you know, a different colour is the little pouch that is hanging there was done with some Mornfang brown. What I'm now doing is going over all of this with shades. So as before, the skeleton will be having Relictor flesh shade. The gold will have the gloss version. The candles, you can see I'm just putting a small amount of the flesh shade in there, just to give them slightly sort of reddish tone. And then any of the parchment and banner type stuff will be done with the Seraphim Sapia. I'm trying to think now. The bag will be done with Agrak's Earthshade. And I have just realised that I am actually doing these skulls with the Relictor Fresh Shade when they should be the Agrak's Earthshade. So a slight mistake on my part there. If you are painting along, do not do that. Use the Agrak's Earthshade and it will match in with the bone on his armour. It's actually only through editing this that I even noticed that I'd done that. But oh well, we can't all be perfect. So anyway, I'll get on with this, let these shades dry, and then we'll come back for the final highlights and finishing touches. Right, and welcome back, guys. So obviously I've missed a little bit of footage again, just adding some of those highlights, but they are exactly the same as I did for the rest of the model. All I'm doing now is painting up the staffs and the handles on the hammer and the dagger, and for this I'm using some corn red for a base tone, just to get a nice reddish tone that is obviously a little bit more towards the purpley pinkish side, so that it's a little bit different to the cloth on the front of him. I usually do this with all my models. If they have red on them, I'll use red for one section and a different type of red on weapons and such, you know, the handles for them. So once I've applied this, I'll then follow that up with some Wazdaka red. Obviously allowing this paint to dry, it's only takes a few seconds to dry. By the time I get through the handles, the staff pole has already dried. I'll then apply this as a highlight towards the front of the staff, leaving that corn red behind. I'll then mix in a little bit of white scar to get a slightly more lighter and more pinkish tone, and as the white is from the day before, it's dried out a little bit, which gives it an almost dry brush effect when I gently pull the bristles down across the front of the staff to give it those highlights. I'll then mix in another little bit of white just to brighten it up a little bit more, and just add a couple of little light strokes just to add in that a little bit more pink. Unfortunately, as I've said before, the webcam that I'm using at the moment for recording isn't great on getting true colours, but obviously, you know, I'm working with what I've got for now and hoping to improve that later on. You'll also notice that I've gone ahead and finished the base. So that brings us to the end of this video, guys. First of all, I would like to thank you all ever so much for watching the video and for your continued support. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. It helps ever so much with the YouTube's algorithm to get me noticed a little bit more and to help the channel grow. Obviously, it's a great way to help support the channel. If you're not already subscribed, please consider hitting that subscription button. Obviously, if you ding that bell as well, you'll get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Obviously, with COVID situations and some personal stuff going on at the minute, videos are a little bit hit or miss, but I'm trying to get them out every Monday for the Mortal Realms series, and every Friday for the Indomitus series, although that has taken a little bit of a pause. If you'd like to support the channel a little bit more, I do have a Patreon set up with 2 tiers now. The first tier is basic, you know, just to show a little bit of financial support towards the channel. Any money from Patreon will obviously go back into the channel. The first item I'm looking to buy with that money will be a decent camera to make better videos, as well as a standalone microphone. At the moment I'm using the one built into my cheap webcam. So obviously that will help. The second tier that is on there, the Chapter Master tier, includes at the minute my character focus series, focusing on the Primarchs from the Forge World Primarchs character series. Those are 1 hour long videos going through every step that I do to paint a model, with no voiceover. That is all live recorded and live voiced. And then that's an early access that you'll get on that. A month later, an edited version of that will be here on YouTube. So if you don't want to, you can't afford, or whatever reason, to support the channel through Patreon, then don't worry, you are not missing out on anything. You know, there are no paywall specific stuff. You will just get a slightly edited version with voiceover, very much in the style that I am doing these videos. But if you'd like to see a more in-depth and support the channel more, then obviously there's that Patreon option for you. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video, guys. So thank you ever so much for joining me. Once again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, take it easy and keep painting those minis.